Today is the 10th anniversary of Skylanders. For me personally, Skylanders is a series that's very near and dear to my heart, so I wanted to celebrate the series in a special way with the people behind the games. Hi, how's everyone doing?
Good to see you. Hi, Teal.
Hi, Teal.
Hi, I'm overwhelmed. There's so many more people than I expected.
Oh, sorry.
No,
yeah.
it's amazing.
Sorry, not sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, Teal. I'm Paul, and we know each other. It's nice to
We
see
do.
you.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while, but this is a great conversation to jump back into. I'm the co-studio head at Toys for Bob, and my name is Paul Yan.
I am Daniel Ikeda, and I am a senior artist, and I was part of the Skylanders, worked on all the Toys for Bob version of Skylanders and stuff. Professional rock painter, yes.
Hello, folks. My name is Ray West. I am lead level designer at Toys for Bob. Back in the day on Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, I was a senior game designer.
Hey, I'm Andy Salvo. I am currently the lead animator at Toys for Bob, but I started out on Skylanders as a gameplay animator and then eventually founded the cinematics team and took over cinematic animation from there.
I'm Lou Studdert. Hi, everyone. I'm creative producer at Toys for Bob now, but back in the Skylanders days, I was production coordinator and various other production jobs at Activision, working with Toys for Bob on Skylanders remotely, as well as the other teams that worked on Skylanders, Vicarious Visions, Beanox, and I also got to do a bunch of silly YouTubery as well.
That's the face and voice of Skylanders, Lou Studdert.
If it's not Teal. My name is
That's true.
Toby Schadt, currently design director at TFB. Back in the old days, I was focusing on hero powers, so Skylander abilities and powers. And I want to take credit. This might not be completely accurate, but I know as one of the early discoverers of Teal's videos about Skylanders right after Spyro's Adventure came out. He was one of the first fans to sort of get his voice out there and tell the world why he loved Skylanders, and it made us really excited to see and hear those streams, especially coming all the way from England. It made it extra special.
I remember those first weeks just hugging your videos every single time. All those playthroughs, those were really great. We were passing them back and forth like, ah.
Yeah, not a lot of work done got during that time. That was a lot of people walking and really enjoying seeing somebody enjoy it as much as we enjoyed making it.
I really appreciate that. Does it feel weird that it's been 10 years since the first release?
Yes, very much so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Two kids, a lot less hair, a lot more grays, different areas of the state. Yeah, 10 years is a while.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, so like, I feel like depending on who you ask, whether it be any of you or anyone who's played the games, they're going to give a completely different answer. But what does Skylanders mean to you? I'm starting off big.
It's too big. You know, honestly, the for me, it's the connection with the fans and that sense of really getting our target audience where they live and knowing that we were going to deliver something that they were going to identify with just as we did when we were growing up. I think that was what really stood out for me.
I think there's multiple things, right? Because it's like what the Skylanders games mean to everyone, and then also selfishly what just even the experience of working on it was for me. I mean, it's like my whole career growth and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life is due to Skylanders. I worked in the industry before that, but I've never really, latched onto and fell in love with, a game, a series, a team, a fan base, like I did with Skylanders initially. And it, helped me just kind of re-fall in love with video games and making them and talking with fans and all of those things. And to that, I wouldn't trade the Skylanders experience for anything.
I think for me, there's two pieces to it. There's one, which is the initial journey was this crazy wild swing at something that was unknown and super risky. And every step of the way, we're like, what are we making? Is this going to work? Kind of like just juggling between those questions. And then on the second part is just on the creative aspect of things is it was so unshackled, and there's no bounds to anything. This wasn't attached really to any other IP. So the expectations for it could go anywhere. And I think that just was a really colorful period for all of us, because any idea could just plop into it, and you would fire up the build and there's just new ideas, new jokes, new characters just show up. And it's like, yeah, this is a soup of inspiration that was growing day by day.
I was just going to say it.
Oh, Toby.
Sorry, Andy.
No.
It kind of became the identity of our studio, really. I mean, it was, there were several different eras to TFB's history so far, but from 2011 on, it really gave us, just an identity. I mean, our conference rooms were named after Skylanders, for example, and the walls became adorned with all the great concept art that was done, and then cabinets and cabinets upon cabinets of Skylander prototypes and models and old portal prototypes. And we are grateful.
To me, just the magic of seeing kids light up when that first toy came to life, and reading stories about parents rediscovering gaming with their children and things like that, I thought was really something I didn't expect to get so much enjoyment out of going in, but definitely just seeing those stories and seeing, I told this story a couple days ago, but being in Target, like right when the first game came out, and wondering, like, is this going to work? This is crazy. Like, this is not something that exists anywhere else. And then being in the video game section and watching kids take toys off the shelves and put them on the portal and watch the TV and light up. It was like, oh, maybe we got something here. This is pretty cool. Those are sort of indelible moments from just in my entire career. There haven't been really many other things that are anything like that.
You've all got very different jobs when working on the games, so I suspect there'll be quite radically different answers here. But what were your favorite parts of development, and it could relate to any of the games, or favorite part of seeing the games completed? I mean, you sort of touched on that in the last question.
Honestly, it's very, 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 very hard to nail it down to just one, because I think part of what was so great about these games is what these guys have touched on, is the amount of creativity, the amount of uniqueness. So each game had its own kind of unique problems, or its unique kind of features, or its unique parts of development. Like, I still remember being away from the studio, but getting early looks at things, and like the first Trap Team portal being assembled from like soldered pieces connected to, I think, a speaker via like headphone jacks, and having to figure out the right wiring to get it to work, to show it off. Things like that just stick out in my mind. And then also my unique chance of getting to kind of travel around to talk to people and show the game off. The getting over and conquering stage fright and doing whole presentations in front of big crowds who were really eager to see what the games had to be about. I could point to one, or you could name a game and I could point to a million others. And so I think that's what's so great about the experience. I'll leave it at that. There's too many.
It's only the 10th anniversary of Spyro's Adventure, so we have to only talk about that game today.
Okay.
Just to interject quickly, Lou, it's interesting you mentioned like stage fright, because the first time I met you was at E3 2013, talking about Swap Force, and you were just talking about I believe, I can't remember the name of the chapter, the fourth chapter of the game, and it was just like in a little theater, I guess, in one of the
yes
back.
I remember those. Yeah.
It was my first experience ever for anything like that, so it was just like, it was so cool to see and be part of that. And you just, it's quite inspiring to see you and others talk about the game with such passion. Like, it really hyped us all up to play the little demo, and then ultimately try the game when it came out, however many months later. It was so cool.
That's what made it all so much easier and more comfortable, is because it was talking about a game that you truly loved, and it all came from the heart and came from the passion of working with this team and working with the other teams and just loving the game.
For me, as at that time when I was working on Spyro, it was level art. So I was doing a lot of the level art, and it's basically trusting your designer and like trying to art it out and hope that things, the players led to the correct way. So it's almost like telling a joke and then waiting a year and a half for people. And like at the time, YouTube playthroughs are kind of new, so it was kind of fun to say like, it hit, it totally hit, and that kind of moment felt really good. Someone appreciating the amount of love and craftsmanship and collaboration between all departments coming together, and someone like just being joyous on those occasions you work on.
Favorites. I'm terrible at favorites, but I can tell you the first one that comes to mind, which is probably an indicator of like how powerful that moment is. But coming up with characters and working with our concept artist, Iwe, I think my favorite moment was always discussing the drawings with him. And then we'd always have these like very practical conversations about like, oh, well, that character doesn't have a neck, and that's going to be really problematic because we're going to set it up for animation. We're not going to be able to pull off these things. We won't be able to show direction when you're moving on the screen. And eventually it would get to a place in which that drawing settles down into a model, and we would view it on the computer and like, okay, this looks pretty good. And then we would print it. And that's the moment where it would come out and it'd be physical. And that's the uniqueness of this whole experience too. And it doesn't seem like it makes a huge difference because you've been staring at this 3D model forever on the screen. But the moment that you hold it, something changes. And you have a completely different set of experiences and expectations of what this character is and should be and its personality. And so it's that, for me, it's that moment of when it came out of the 3D printer and we had it all set up and we could actually hold it and put it on the table and actually physically put it onto a portal. That was the moment that kind of unlocked like this journey, like, okay, now we can start to make this come alive.
One memorable moment for me was, so we were really sweating in about February or March of 2010 that we were going to be shipping this game with all kinds of expectations from our publisher in terms of how successful it was going to be because of the risks that they were taking in terms of the number of toys that were being manufactured, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember when we found out that Activision was going to give us another 10 months or so to really make the game shine. And we found out that, for example, the technology in the toys was going to be better, a little bit cheaper, so that we could afford to put memory in the toys so they could remember what level they were, what their nicknames were, what hats they were wearing. And it was really a big piece of the magic in terms of taking your toys to your friend's house and having them be the same toy. So we were very excited internally because we knew we could make the game experience itself better too. And an executive who I won't name was actually up at our studio to sort of fire us up to work that extra year on the game. And I remember shaking this gentleman's hand and saying, thank you for the extra time to make the game great. And he just turned to me and he said, just totally deadpan, there's no more time, there's only more work. And so just internally I was laughing. Like I say, I won't name the guy, but and I won't disclose the accent that he had.
Yeah, do the accent.
Oh, God.
Anyway, that was a great gift from Activision because it really allowed us to give the game all the love that we knew that it needed in order to really reach the fans.
Ray.
I was actually going to say something very similar to that. By the way, who gave Lou this job of basically assigning to whoever it is?
I'm a
It's
producer.
you.
He's a producer.
Oh, right.
He's in
Just
the
does
middle.
it. Yeah, he's in the center of my screen.
He's
Yeah,
dead
you are in the
center.
center. So.
He's the Brady Bunch.
That's terrific. Hi, Alice. I'm going to call him Alice from now on. So yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing that Toby said. It was up until that time, this unproven, untested, we're going to make exactly how many millions of toys. I mean, that was, we we kept waiting for Activision suits to burst through the door and say, you guys are out of your minds. But that moment where we, we got this extra time, we decided to go from our massive list of levels that were going to be like popcorn. It was just going to be something that you could quickly run through them and get out of them quickly. We're going to focus those down to a core number of levels. We're going to really blow the doors off of our budgets for art and really make each of these levels a giant experience as opposed to something fast and furious. That was a really great time when we knew we were on to something, and getting that vote of confidence from Activision that we were on the right track was really something for us, and it really gave us a wind at our backs to really turn it on.
It's tough to pick a favorite, especially because I mean, on the animation team, we always had a lot of strange little projects going on, whether it was getting 360 photos of all the toys for the app on the iPad, or stop motion animating the Toys for Bob logo at the beginning of the game. Like, those little things stood out as just like, it's not what we do day to day, but it's just, we know how to do this. Can we do it in an interesting way? Can we have fun with it? And those little things always stood out to me as like exciting one-offs along the way. But I think when it comes to the game as a whole, just as I played through the games, I always noticed that there was always more we could do story-wise, and more we could do in just visually telling the story. Like, our scripts were always funny and unusual and the weirdest jokes you could possibly come up with. But I felt early that there was just a long way to go in how we could deliver those stories visually. So as our tools developed throughout the different games, I started to see like the opportunities to do more. And I really felt like some of the most memorable points for me were each of those big steps forward where our cinematic tools got better and we were able to do, animated paths for the flying objects, or fully animated cinematics and things like that. Those really, each one of those big, each game, if you're looking at just our side of the cinematics, has sort of a light year leap forward in terms of what we were trying to do. And that really was something I was very proud of.
Hey, Teal, I'm curious. What does Skylanders mean to you?
Well, for me, so when the first one came out, I was 17. So I was in my mid to late teenager, everything must be guns and explosions, I don't care about animations, kind of phase. And Skylanders, I picked it up because I like Spyro. Let's give it a go. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a cool game. And I mean, I'm sure you remember. I'm intrigued to every level being like, I love this, 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 and it brought back like a childhood wonderment for me, like that I kind of just lost because I was an idiot teenager. I relearned how to be a kid again, which you should never lose. It's always a special part of you. And yeah, I'm really, really glad that you guys brought it back for me. Thank you.
You're telling me I'm the one who gave away all my Star Wars toys in my early teens, and now I'm spending, as everyone here will tell you, my desk is now filled with them because I have to get them all back. It's just awful.
The Skylanders games had many challenges along the way, I'm sure, just from the scope of them. But what did you learn whilst making Skylanders that has helped you on future games? Lou, you go first.
Sure. I think every game that you work on, you learn something new. For Skylanders, obviously, we had to learn a whole new set of things along with making a game. It was all about, making toys, which is the fact that Skylanders was almost two separate types of industries running in parallel is insane. So it's not like we're making toys right now, even though we are Toys for Bob. I will say, it helped me look at, how these characters and their moves could bring unique experiences and huge amounts of replay to an experience. Just strictly from a design and gameplay standpoint, the fact that the character team made like a bajillion characters over the course of these games and had to come up with new and unique experiences for each, really kind of in a case study of game design, showing you all of the ways that you get to interact in this type of game or even other types of games is insane. Like it's Toby, pat yourself on the back. You and the team, you guys should be studying this, right? Like there's hundreds and hundreds of expressions of gameplay interaction in this series. And for me, like you can go back and think of a character who could probably, be fleshed out and star in his own series, from a gameplay standpoint. And the fact that there's hundreds of those is just banana pants. And so I think it's a textbook example of great game design that's been made accessible. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to the character team. That was one of the pillars that we had early on. This is that because there's an investment for each one of these toys, every toy has to feel like you've plopped this down and you should feel like you have an entirely new way to play the game. And that was something that, when it was hard enough with the original 32 or 24 characters that we had, I've forgotten how many.
32.
How many?
32.
Yeah.
So they're right behind me.
Sorry, let's count them. But yeah, starting with those and then compounding that our QA people by the end having to test all of these characters on all of these levels, they were
champions.
They were
MVPs.
champions.
Yeah.
We laughed when we considered how many permutations they'd have to test in PvP. The idea that it could ever be a balanced PvP experience was a funny one. Oh no, I started talking, so I guess
now you gotta go.
What I learned.
You got the baton.
I feel like Paul Ritchie, one of the things that he taught me about making games was just that you shouldn't make assumptions about what players will know coming into a game. And so really learning deeply that making a game accessible from the start for all different kinds of players is a big win. It doesn't mean that every game needs to do it, but I think one of the reasons Skylanders was successful is that a non-gamer or a non-hardcore gamer parent could sit down with a 5 or 6 year old kid and pick up the Wii remote and start playing Skylanders and have a really pleasant experience, which is not always the case if you pick up a lot of games nowadays. There's a lot of assumptions baked into what players will know. And so figuring out how to do that while at the same time making sure there's enough depth to keep the players who are more sophisticated interesting, it was a big challenge. And so I think no matter what gaming audience you're looking at, I think remembering that someone might be coming at it from a fairly fresh perspective was really that lesson we learned several times over with every Skylanders game we made.
I would say, I mean, in terms of what I personally learned from Skylanders is really just how valuable, how to interface with designers and how valuable that can be to the creation of a character. Because most animators, if you're working on the playable character in a game, it's usually one or two characters, and that's your whole job for the whole game. With Skylanders, it was like you're doing a playable character every 2 to 3 weeks, and it's so you're just pulling reference and pulling ideas out of wherever, and the designers got ideas, and the animators have got ideas, and there's so many characters and so many things flying around, and everything's so new and unique that a lot of those ideas will just stick. Like you'll come up with something crazy, and you'll be like, oh, or the designer will be like, oh, I want Chop Chop to have a 9-way combo attack, and you'd be like, okay, we'll try it and we'll see. And so up until that point, I hadn't, you'd work with designers on like a jump or metrics or something like that, but as an animator, you weren't really involved with like coming up with ideas for full moves or how things are gonna look and or how they're gonna hook together. And that started out kind of early on the first Skylander game, and it got more and more significant to the point where at the end it was like animators and designers sitting next to each other just spitballing. And I thought that was a really cool experience. And I learned a lot about, like, this is how a designer thinks about how this asset is going to go in, and this is how I think it's going to go in. And when we are all on the same page, it works a lot better than when we're just in separate rooms doing our own things.
Yeah, I have a similar takeaway too. I think that I would say I learned to trust other teams way more intimately, and just respect the craft and the thought process that goes into things, because it's always a surprise to kind of see. It's really easy for individual teams to like put up walls and just kind of put your heads down and just work on the thing that you're doing. But some of the best characters and best levels that we've got are when, you know, individuals have got up off their seats and then interacted with other teams and really sat down and just riffed and played with different ideas. And we're surprised by that. You know, one thing, yeah, I was an animation lead on SSA, and one practice that we started that really stuck with us was to do dailies. And we found that dailies is a way of every single day, all the animators would get together and show off the work that they're doing and just putting it up there, and we'd have open conversation and feedback about things. And we found that if you can make someone laugh in that room, you're onto something, and that should stick, and that should stay in the game. And that really worked for Skylanders.
I learned a lot from Skylanders. It's it's playing to the camera. Like we're treating it's a fixed camera, it's along the ride, and you're basically trying to give the player a guided tour, and just working with designers, and they come up with these crazy ideas, and you're like, let's do it. You know, a lot of situations like that. Showing areas that I learned a lot from just art, like learning the playable, non-playable areas and how to delineate those things. And the levels are basically what I learned is like are the playground for the characters to kind of shine. And that was really fun to see that, how people played the level differently with each character.
I think I will ask you a very tough question. Favorite Skylander?
I came prepared. I've got Double Trouble staring behind me.
Not Zulu.
No, I love Zulu very much, but you know that's.
I wanted to ask.
That's practically nepotism if I said Zulu.
I wanted to ask, how did that come about?
Oh God. Honestly, it was one of those things where naming a Skylander was one of the most fun but most difficult experiences, because there's so many characters and you want everyone to have a really fun name. And so, you know, between the studio, between us at Activision, we would actually basically make these Excel lists of massive amounts of possible names. And some of them were really fun, and some of them were just abysmally bad. And I remember this is how bad my goldfish brain is. Zulu was from Swap Force, right? Not Super. Yeah, it was Swap Force. So I remember we were getting all the Swap Force characters. We were working on a lot of them, and we were coming up with ideas. And Zulu was really hard to name, because if you remember, he's kind of like a panda gnome, you know, like furry little dude with no neck and a staff, and you're coming up with all these other names. And he rode on all these animals, and it was one of those things where I think at the time, every name that we came up with, we had to get our current, you know, or at the time CEO Eric Hirschberg's like thumbs up on. And so we'd come up with all these lists, we'd whittle it down into our top like 5, and then we'd go in there and see what he liked. And I remember for Zulu, or at least that time, he had been circling around the idea of all our characters had these fun like pun names, and he had really wanted a character just to have a normal human name for, you know, just for some reason. And I wasn't even in the meeting, and they went in, came out, and was like, yeah, we're gonna go with Zulu. And I'm like, this guy? Like, yeah, you know, it kind of works, you know, because Zulu, you know, was on there and Zoo was on there. We also would have like word associations, you know, of just like, what does this character make you feel about? And they came out, it's like, you named a Skylander. So I didn't name it myself. I will say that. I did not go, yeah, this guy reminds me of me.
Big fuzzy dude, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it is 8 years ago, so you probably don't remember. But do you remember at all any of the original other ideas for the Skylander?
Oh goodness, not necessarily Zulu himself, but I mean, some of the other characters. Gosh, yeah, I'd have to do some deep diving to find some of those old lists. But I remember there was one point we were so desperate with the Giants that one of the names for Thumpback, who was my first character that I named, I was very proud of that, was like Big Mouth Whale. Like that's how sad we were. It was the worst name I'd ever seen, and that actually went into the meeting as a possibility. And it was like, please don't pick that one. That we were very tired.
Internally, we early on we were kind of opposed to giving each Skylander a proper name because we kind of felt like everyone's individual toy, we wanted them to feel like that was their character. So we had Chop Chop, for example, the working dev name was the Pandoran Elite. And so Ray could name his Pandoran Elite. I could name mine. We would all have unique versions of it. And then, yeah, I think it was Hirschberg or someone else down at Activision just kind of came in and said, we're giving them each names. They need to have their own unique personalities, which I think was the right call. But at the same time, someone down there was lobbying that you shouldn't be able to also give a nickname. Mm-hmm. So the compromise was that we put quotes around the nickname. And I think it was a win-win situation. I think it was a great call to have the funny proper names that we ended up with, for sure.
I think it's also really interesting because as the series went on, you can actually go back to the original, Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. Not a lot of them had dialogue. They had like grunts and sounds because it was more about a portal master and you having a collection of creatures than them being kind of individual personalities. And as the series went on, they became stronger and I think more distinct personalities.
One other detail about Double Trouble, you probably know this already, Teal, but he had a completely different character design. It was another of the few things that were vetoed by Santa Monica. At some point, there was a no white-haired wizards edict.
No wizards.
No white-haired wizards.
Kids don't like old people.
They're tired. Yes. So Haldor, I actually had to look it up.
Haldor, yeah.
The NPC was actually what Double Trouble used to look like.
Yeah. That's right. That was what this question was. Yeah, Double Trouble's the best Skylander, not Zulu. I love Zulu, but Double Trouble's the best because he's got like minions. So if you're running away from enemies and kind of kiting them, you can leave things behind you that would seek out the enemies. He's got a really cool staff that would track. So it actually had, he felt overpowered in a lot of great ways for the type of play that I liked. And so he was great at taking down chompies.
Yeah, he was the Araloo skiff of Skylanders. He had that sort of auto-tracking laser.
Yes.
To me, a lot of the Skylanders track back to some of the original Star Control ship ideas. So I'll see things, I'll be like, oh, that's a Star Control ship. And Double Trouble's staff to me was like one of the big ones that reminded me of Star Control.
It's almost like Toys for Bob made Star Control.
Almost.
Andy, you were talking. Who's your favorite Skylander?
Well, that's a tough call. You mentioned working on Thumpback.
Which of your favorite children are your favorite children?
Yeah, I animated quite a few Skylanders is the thing. You mentioned Thumpback. It was one of my favorites, partly because I sat next to sound at that point, and Dan Neal, our sound guy, is the voice of Thumpback. And just listening to him trying to come up with what he was going to sound like, I thought was really entertaining. And I always loved, because with cinematics too, I interface with sound a lot. So that was really fun. I think if I had to pick one, that would probably be Trigger Happy. Just because he was kind of the first one I really figured out. And I don't think he was the first Skylander I animated, but he stuck with me in a way just because, you come out of school animating and you're animating bipeds and things like that. And then somebody gives you a raindrop with arms and legs. No knees either. Like he doesn't really have knees. And they give you this raindrop with arms and legs, and they're like, okay. And you're like, what's he do? Like, we don't know. He's got guns. You're like, okay. So I literally was like, okay, big guns. Let's go Yosemite Sam and see what happens. And I just started banging things together, coming up with just different moves. And he was one, I remember he wasn't part of the box originally.
Yeah. He was a late addition to the starter.
like I'm not sure the exact reasoning behind that, but I remember Paul Ritchie coming over and asking me questions about what I did with him, because I think he liked him so much. He enjoyed playing him. And I think at some point he kind of like went from being this just weird little guy running around spinning guns to like, oh, we're going to put him in the box set because he's fun to play. And I felt like that was a really great synthesis of like, he had a fun design, and like his animation, just watching him was entertaining. He stood out as somebody kind of unique to the other characters.
Wasn't it that it was the Cyclops snail that was in the starter kit originally? Is that why we had to replace? That was one of the reasons.
I mean, the Cyclops snail still made it into the game, just in a different form. Zap was Cyclops snail, right?
I don't know, because that would mean that there were.
We also wanted a character. We wanted a character with a lobbied attack. That was part of it too.
Right.
Yeah, and he did. He had that move went through so many different iterations, but yeah, eventually the safe throw.
Thank for trigger happy. I remember his premise was really gutsy. It was he was going to shoot the gold that he collected. Yeah, it turns out people don't like losing money.
Yeah. And his secondary spin attack was like would draw gold out from the enemies around him, so he could like refill the coffers and then shoot all the money that he got. He was a strange one, but really fun to work on. And I was happy he kind of being in the box set was kind of a neat little, did a good job moment.
Here's my guy. I'll go with Ghost Roaster, who was also another character that we were worried some players might have a hard time with, because he does have to sacrifice his own HP in order to use one of his moves. It was something we weren't that risky on most of the other abilities in the game. So he's my pick, Ghost Roaster.
Yeah, it evolved during the development. I really enjoyed Boomer. Who doesn't love beard pants? But it was one of those where the more as we would get more characters that came online, we'd start running through the levels and testing things, and somehow I started leveling up Prison Break. And once you were able to start just turning dropping crystals on enemies that would kill them, and then being able to turn dead enemies into crystals, and then just like light up the screen with as Jeff Gersman once called it, hot laser death. That was always an entertaining thing for me. So I think he's my favorite to play as.
I remember playing Prison Break, and this was one of those things where it's like, again, that kind of unique design is that Prison Break starts kind of, I don't want to say mediocre, but a little hard to play. But then he just becomes this beast. And then other characters start really strong, but then, don't reach the level of Prison Break. And so that's just continued, the fun there.
Unless you're playing Drobot, in which case Drobot wins everything. Drobot is awesome.
That perfectly dovetails to me, because for me, it's Wrecking Ball for his personality, but I leveled up Drobot when just playing through just the levels, just testing him. So much so that I depended on that little guy for a lot of just getting through areas and just trying and refining certain areas, again, to play for the camera. But I really like Wrecking Ball, just his little happy predisposition, his tongue, and it was just silly and testament of great character and art and design.
Pretty good animation too, right, Daniel?
The best.
Might have done that one.
Man, I feel like every time I'm asked this question, I have a different answer. So I'm being inconsistent, but I really love Wrecking Ball too. That was a real test and constraint, and you don't have much to work with, and yet that character still feels squishy and bouncy. He's got a bunch of personality, and I thought that came across really well.
You ended up bringing back Crash for Imaginators. How did that come about? Did Activision ask you? Did you ask them? Did you know about the Insane trilogy at the time?
Who's gonna?
Paul, you want to grab that one?
Paul might know the answer to that one. I'm not sure.
I don't know that I know the full journey of that one either, but believe that expansion,
Then Vicarious Visions had a big part in that. I think
they did.
They had a history with Crash.
Yeah, I remember they animated the cinematics for the Sensei intros too on those.
And that was
Yeah.
their level. They actually,
Yeah,
really wanted to make that happen. And, Thumping Wumpa Island is one of those where it's
that
like,
was a sweet level.
it was a sweet level. And so we were jazzed when they were going to do it for us. It was great.
Well, and Superchargers too did it have Bowser in it?
Yeah,
So
yeah, had Bowser.
yeah.
Donkey Kong.
So I think, yeah, it was an expansion of that idea. I think just trying to find different
Unique
IPs
guest
to give them.
stars. Yeah.
Yeah, they were just precedent
That's
there.
cool. So you creating many awesome concepts from the Traptanium crystals to creating your own Skylander and Imaginators. Were there any concepts that you wanted to explore that didn't reach development or had to be scrapped at some point? Or
Yeah, that happened.
We-
So go ahead.
Oh, I
Daniel.
mean, we arted lots of crazy Ray West levels that the public will never see, and
Probably for the
there's-
best.
but there was a lot of cool ideas in terms of just like visually. But maybe Ray can talk about
Yeah,
more of the design stuff.
we had, even before a certain unnamed third-party competitor had done build your own level stuff, we had toyed around with what that would look like, and I was really excited about it in terms of, we had come up with this way that you could use these different, the best thing about Skylanders being these built up of these floating islands is that you can have standalone little islands that you can make en masse. We came up with a really cool way to lay them out, link them together, populate them with enemies, and populate them with, like keys and doors and things like that. And, and then, miracle of miracles, we figured out ways that you could actually put that layout information down as in a way that could be stored on the toys themselves. So in addition to being able to, like, we could actually develop this full level that would, it wouldn't be giant size levels, but it's 40, 50, 60 linked objects and different ways to put that together. That was something that I really had fun putting together. I remember me and Robert Leyland putting it together over the course of maybe a week and a half, pulling a bunch of Skylanders giants art pieces, coming up with the systems in which you could just put it together. And then I remember showing it to Paul Ritchie, who was literally walking by the conference room that I was talking with one of our enemy designers about it. And he stopped cold and just walked in and we just, it was early prototypes. It was something that we thought about putting in, but, at that time, then we heard that the other unnamed competitor was doing something similar. And so we're like, if we can't do it and we would look like we'd be copying them. So it sort of went away. But that was something that I really thought that we could really spend a lot of time getting right and being able to share it with them. Build your own levels, share it with your friends, have them play with their characters. Sounded like a win, but again, didn't want to come off. We wanted to be innovators about everything that we did. It wasn't about, oh, we're going to do what they did and we're going to do it better. It's got to be something that stands alone.
One of the things I'll mention is not necessarily ideas that didn't make it, but all of the innovations got kind of iterated on and changed and polished through development as we worked in tandem with kind of a hardware team as well as kind of the development team. So all of the ideas kind of started in a slightly different place than where they ended up, and a lot of times for the better. Like I still remember, I think the Trap team, or maybe it was the Imaginators. I think it was the Imaginators
Trap
started
team.
as no. I think it was the Imaginators
I don't know what
started
you're
as
going to say yet, so I
playing
shouldn't.
cards. They started.
They
It
did.
was they were on playing cards instead of being, the object that the Imaginators were in, which was more tangible and fun to hold. So I remember those being cards. I remember, I think Toby was going to interject, Trap Team, they were originally AI buddies instead of you playing as them.
We realized the incredibly massive amount of work it is to have buddies do interesting things throughout every level. I think we saw
dynamically, yeah.
I was going to mention another game that did that, that had a female buddy that would go around and do a bunch of things for you. But then, anyway, that was...
Turns out AI is hard.
AI is hard.
Who knew?
I remember that though. That was really fun. There was a cool moment where before we had settled on exactly how the AI was going to work, we basically hard-coded a green light with Chompy Mage following you around, and I had to do so many unique animations for like Chompy Mage goes here and then does this. I was like, okay, how are we going to deal with that?
That might have been the prototype. That might have been the prototype, actually.
Yeah.
And the
really cool.
Yeah, and in every game we always had a green light or a prototype or something that was really cool, and it was like, can we end up doing all this? But I just remember, like, we get to every problem there, it's like, well, we can't quite figure it out, so we're just going to animate it and we'll figure it out later. And it was like those started to stack up. Maybe we shouldn't do it.
It was very late too. It was about January or February of the ship year that we decided to have the trapped enemies be playable. And Pollyann deserves some credit for writing a long and passionate email to Paul Ritchie about how hey, we really should have them playable. I was a late hold. We were worried that the trapped characters were going to cannibalize sales of the toys, of the playable characters that we were selling as toys. That was one of the big concerns that some of us had anyway. But it turns out Skylanders fans want nothing more than more characters to play with and experience and own. So it worked out just fine.
I think the experience too, like that demo was really strong for having like a passive character that was your ally and was doing cool stuff on the side, but it wasn't like an experience that was sustainable. And then that's not even like the practicalities of it, but it was just like, oftentimes that character would be doing cool stuff and it would be like close to off screen and you're not really paying attention to it, or it would be doing all the cool stuff for you. And then you're like, oh man, it turns out you actually, as a game, you want to play and be the active participant. And so that shift was a massive pivot for us internally, but I think it was ultimately the right decision for us. And we all kind of look back on it like, man, I wish we made that decision sooner, but it was the right decision, I think.
And then I guess a few others real quick. Swap Force initially, like the first prototype, I think was like 5, all like a head and individual arms and legs.
I remember.
And then it was 3 pieces of a head, a torso, and legs, and then it became 2. And then Superchargers, I think we initially were looking at, it was like a vehicle that could transform over land, sea, and air. But then the notion of making a toy that transformed, or you were playing as something on the screen that didn't look like the thing you had on the portal didn't make sense. And so again, throughout the whole process, especially again with the innovation in the toys, there would be iteration from the initial pitch phase to where they ended up.
Even in the portal too, I remember we talked a lot about these crazy novel ideas, but the portal would be an indicator for gameplay, or it would speak to you and you'd have to notice it. And it was just, there was competing attention for like things that were on the screen versus things that were right in front of you. And it turns out that like you wanted to keep your attention squarely focused on this until the game told you to pay attention to this, or it was critical for you to switch the character. So there's like some natural simplification that happened as we started to play the prototypes. And even though there was these awesome ideas for making this cool physical thing, and it didn't necessarily gel well with the experience of the game.
Slightly off topic for Skylanders, but I'm really curious. What has it been like working during the middle of a pandemic? I imagine a lot of challenges have arisen because of that.
We've learned that our IT people are gods. They are, it is amazing. I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I've heard other people have experiences too, but it's like we were astonished that we were up and running at a solid pace within 2 or 3 days after the pandemic started for here in California, and it was amazing. It also in some ways helped our communication styles, because a lot of us, you had people who all have different preferred methods of getting information from other teammates. You've got some people who prefer instant message, some people for email, and some people who are like, well, forget it, I'm just going to march over to his desk and ask a question. But with the pandemic, we said, yeah, that's you.
I miss bothering Ray.
I missed the designer production aisle, or sorry, the production aisle is like the gauntlet, because you could not. The way our studio is set up, you've got this. You've got two sides of the building connected by a hallway where there are a bunch of producers. So anybody who is going backwards and forth is like, oh wait, no wait, Ray, stop. Wait, let me ask you a question. You never made it past production without getting. But it was like, because of all of these different communication methods, Paul and Avery said at the very beginning, let's go with Slack. Let's go with this particular single method of communication as the primary form of communication. And it basically improved our communication in the short to midterm. I was astonished at how well we were up and running and able to nail out the rest of the Crash project. It was amazing.
I'm sure it's been said before, but when you are crunching on a game, and every game has, a period of varying lengths where you're pushing really hard, being able to work from home during the push on Crash 4 was great for those of us with families, because you didn't have to make that choice of driving to the studio and work a couple more hours at night, or just, put your kid to bed and then go get a little work done after hours. So in that sense, it made the push to finish a game a lot more kind of sustainable.
It basically allowed me to communicate through Slack, and just having screen caps of things directly and send it to and do bad photoshops or memes to prove a point is a great way for artists to communicate to designers, because we had the power of Photoshop.
Photoshops.
Yeah.
Amazing memes.
Yeah. Lots of Lou Photoshops too. I can't share them.
So many people have grown up playing your games, not just the newest ones, and not just Skylanders, but older games like Madagascar or 102 Dalmatians, stuff like that. So, yeah, what advice do you have for people trying to enter the industry? I'm sure a lot of fans of your work would be quite excited to hear what you have to say.
Make stuff. Just do it. There's nothing stopping you today. Pick up a copy of whatever, Unreal or Unity or whatever game engine, and make something. That proves a lot. And you'll be able to talk about your experience with developers, and if it gets to an interview, and you'll be able to practically point to things that you overcame and things that you learned. So just make stuff.
And then my stock advice for younger folks still in school is that games are becoming so large in the sense that so many different disciplines are working on them, that you can find an area in school that you are passionate about, that you are good at, that has a correlating kind of like job in video games, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's directly tied to development, but it could be tied to working at a big publisher. I mean, if you are really good at math, there's still something fun about being in finance, at a video game studio. If you're really good at art, well, hey, there's a lot of art roles. If you're really good at, X, Y, or Z. So honestly, I think finding the thing that you love and then finding out what that corollary is, in video games, is a great path to work toward as well.
Does anyone have any closing thoughts or anything they want to share?
Honestly, I think we've said this many a time, and we'll continue to say it, but a big thank you to you, Teal, a big thank you to the folks who advocated for Skylanders, a big thank you for the fans out there. We made it for families, we made it for everybody, and it was one of those things where I think it's very easy to look at something and potentially pigeonhole it as an item for a younger generation, which devalues it in some way. And it was thanks to a number of folks, again, yourself included, who really saw what the team was trying to do, and that it was not necessarily just for a laser focused audience, but for everyone. And the fact that it touched as many people's hearts as it did is still the coolest experience of my career. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Teal. Thank you to friends at Toys for Bob for coming up with such a insane idea. And that's kind of my thoughts on the whole experience.
I think that was
Say
well
much
said.
better
I
than
don't
that.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's
How do
great.
I follow
Well
That's
that?
a wrap.
Perfect.
Yeah, nothing I came up with sounded that good. So
That's right. So in other words, ditto. How's that? That's
yes,
what
what
he
Lou
said.
said.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this, and thank you for everything you've done across all of your games, because yeah, they've definitely improved my life and changed the course of my career. So yeah, it's been a true pleasure to play everything you've made, and a true honor to speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Teal.
Thanks, Teal.
Thanks,
Thank
Teal.
you.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Let's do it again next year for Giants.
Yeah, 1 year cycle.
I love Giants. I love
Giants was
Giants.
great.
Yes, Giants was great. Oh,
If I had to pick one, it would probably be Giant.
Yeah, that was it. You know, the questions of whether or not we're on the right track. Yeah,
There-
see,
Yeah,
Scarlett
Scarlett.
did
There
she
she is.
That's the good one.
Love.
Yeah,
So
all of
good.
those questions as to whether or not we were on the right track were answered, and then we were just like, well, what can we do? Let's do it. That was
let's
great.
pull an island, Ray. Let's just pull an
Yeah.
island. Let's do.
That's another green. That was another
It's
green
so
light
strange.
idea.
Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more stuff like this, I have a developer commentary of Skylanders Spyro's Adventure with 14 members of Toys for Bob and 1 member of Vicarious Visions. Ben Frost from Vicarious Visions actually spoke to me about the 3DS version that he made. They made it in such a small amount of time. It's a really fascinating watch. Throughout this massive series, we go in depth about everything to do with the first Skylanders game, and it was a massive honor to make. And yeah, link in the description and at the very end of the video at the title card thing. I'd very much appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed, and maybe share the video around if you want other people to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Skylanders. Thank you so much to Toys for Bob for agreeing to be part of this and for making Skylanders. It's always such a pleasure and an honor to speak with them, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. Tell me, what is your favorite Skylanders game? What is your favorite Skylander? I want to know everything about what you love about Skylanders. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and here's to another 10 years in the world of Skylands. I'll see you later. Take care. Bye-bye.